I'm Aislinn. Welcome back to Collection Cut Down. Today's video is on a movie called All for Love, also known as St. Ives. It's based on the Robert Louis Stevenson story called St. Ives, hence the difference. In my review for The Abduction Club, I talked a little bit about how I'm always on the hunt for period dramas with happy endings, and this is another one that came up during that search at the same time. Being Robert Louis Stevenson, it also has some adventure elements. So this one's set during the Napoleonic Wars. So the interesting thing about this movie is that I don't remember anything about it at all, but I remember it being weird. Now, I'm assuming because it's a period drama, it's not like Surprise Aliens weird. It is probably more tonally weird. But I do remember that being the prevailing impression that I had after seeing this film, even if I can't remember why. So I'm actually really interested to see this one again and figure out why I thought it was so bizarre. It has a great cast, including Anna Friel, who I love, and Miranda Richardson. It has Richard E. Grant in it. So I am actually really interested to see this one again and see what I think about it now. And with that in mind, I'm going to dive right in and see you all on the other side. All for Love is about a French soldier who is also the heir to countdom, though there's some complications regarding that. He gets captured in war and taken to a Scottish prison to wait out the rest of the war, and there he falls in love with a woman who visits the prison and kind of ends up having an odd friendship with the captain of the guards there, played by Richard E. Grant. I said in the intro that this movie was weird, and that's what I remembered about it. And honestly, it wasn't as weird as I was expecting it to be. I think last time I just went in with odd expectations. Because this time I had different expectations, my experience of seeing the film must have been quite different. Because last time, I suspect I just didn't know it was a farce going into it, and that's really what this is in many ways. It's quite ridiculous, and it's meant to be. It did get a few chuckles out of me, particularly in the beginning. The dialogue between him and his friend was quite amusing, and the scene where all the other French soldiers are trying to challenge him to a duel and he's trying to schedule them all into the day. That did get a few chuckles out of me. I did think the scenes of Richard E. Grant being the stereotypical uptight Englishman versus St. Ives being the charming Frenchman, and how Richard E. Grant was asking his advice, that was fun, and then how it was flipped on its head at the end. This movie wouldn't be what it is without the cast. I do like Anna Friel, and though she didn't get a great deal to do with her character, she was very lovely in the role. But it was Miranda Richardson and Richard E. Grant who really made this for me. They were very funny, and particularly together, and the way that they played off each other, I really did enjoy that. And I think ultimately Miranda Richardson's character, she played Anna Friel's aunt in it, and I think that she was definitely my favourite character. They did try and make Flora, the love interest played by Anna Friel, quite spunky and, you know, to give her a little bit of agency in the plot. And I appreciate that, of course I do, but I really thought that the role was a bit of nothing, and it didn't really make the romance particularly convincing for me. Like, they fall in love at first sight, essentially, and there's very little development beyond that. And as something that is an adventure romance, I thought the adventure was fun, but the romance was quite lacking. And since that's pretty much why I watch it, unfortunately that meant that the film didn't wholly work for me. The cast did try their best, but it just wasn't that successful. I think the problem with this was compounded a bit because it felt quite truncated, and I'm guessing that they had to make it a certain time. It's possible because it says it's a BBC production that it had to be on TV, and therefore they needed to fit a particular time slot. In some parts it wasn't that noticeable, but in other parts it really did feel like some emotional beats were missing, particularly between the two brothers So part of the storyline is that St. Ives wants to get his inheritance back, and his grandfather is all for that, but he has a brother, and that creates some tension and conflict. I would have liked more between the brothers and more of an emotional reaction and some discussion. I do feel like it was kind of a bit too easy in some senses, because St. Ives was very annoyed at his grandfather thinking he'd betrayed him, and then as soon as they meet, they don't really have a discussion about that. And it's things like that that I think really could have made this better and more interesting. Like, I know it's meant to be a farce, but you still need to have some emotional heart, and they really did try and have that, particularly with the romance. I just didn't think it was as successful as it should have been. And then the grandfather gets quite a brutal death for such a bloodless movie. It was a shame that, again, that sort of happened before everything was resolved. One of my biggest gripes about this film is about this inheritance thing, because the grandfather just disinherits the older son in favour of our hero, and I wanted to yell that that's not how primogeniture works, and, you know, you can't just disinherit an older son. Apparently in the book, which I haven't read, this is a cousin rather than an older brother who has taken over his position in the household, and that makes a lot more sense because they all think St. Ives is dead. And so, of course, the cousin would be the heir to the title after that. And then with the return, they could have solved it all and so forth. But to have an older brother be between him and the title, you can't just disinherit an older son on a whim. Like, that's not how the law works. And anyway, that very much frustrated me. So ultimately, while a talented cast tries really hard to make this interesting, it just didn't really work for me. It definitely got a few chuckles out of me, and I really did enjoy a lot of the dialogue, but there was too much that just didn't really work for me, particularly the romance just being a little bit dull, and that probably being because the main female love interest didn't really react to a lot. She was just, they tried to make her feisty, but it didn't exactly work. So even though I did go through a little bit in order to acquire this DVD, I don't think I really need to keep it. It's not one that I can see myself dying to see again. Even though I generally tend to like adventure romances, this just wasn't that successful for me. But if you're a fan of Miranda Richardson, I would definitely recommend this movie because she is delightful in it and definitely my favourite part of the film. All for Love is going on the giveaway pile. Up next we have another weepy melodrama, All That Heaven Allows, directed by Douglas Sirk. And I'm really keen to talk about this one with everybody, so I will see you then. In the meantime, please consider liking, subscribing, commenting. I love chatting to people about movies, and if you're enjoying my videos, subscribing will get you notifications when I post a new one. Otherwise, bye for now, and happy watching.